That says go live. Mine doesn't say live on it.
We're live.
Okay. All right. There's nobody in the chat, though.
Well, it's only live for 15 seconds.
EuroBasket comes to a conclusion. Spain wins again. We'll talk about the Denver Nuggets wings and how that rotation and role shapes up this season for Denver with training camp a week away. Whew. Plus, we'll take a look at the Southwest Division and those teams and how the Nuggets stack up against them. This is Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us, making us your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, where you can join the show and join all sorts of great folks like Emil and Tyler and Alan and Derek talking about the Nuggets as we get closer and closer to training camp. Adam Mares from DNVR. You can find him on Twitter at Adam_Mares. We are rapidly approaching the NBA season. Can you believe it?
1 week, media day. 2 weeks, the Nuggets play a preseason game. 4 weeks, they play an actual regular season game, Matt.
That's crazy. That's wild. I have so much to do. I got to get caught up. So on today's show, we're going to talk about EuroBasket, get our final thoughts on the tournament and what that means. We'll talk about the Denver Nuggets wing rotation. We're going to be looking at we're going to look at wings today, and we're going to talk about guards on Wednesday. And on Friday, we'll talk about the bigs. So that's how we're going to split things up and talk about how that rotation looks going into camp. We'll talk about training camp battles, potentially between Davon Reed and Christian Braun, all those types of things. We'll get into that and more. And in the third segment on today's show, we'll talk about the Southwest Division. We'll talk about the Memphis Grizzlies and the Dallas Mavericks and the Houston Rockets and something about the Spurs, I'm sure. We'll talk about all that and more on today's show. Adam, how's your weekend?
Weekend was good. Watched a little EuroBasket. I watched a little football. It was good.
So let's talk about EuroBasket. Spain wins, beats France, Rudy Gobert, Juancho Hernan-Gomez with an absolutely phenomenal game. Former Nugget.
Best game of his life, Matt. I know we have the Juancho game here in Denver, which up until this point was the best game, but this, on the biggest stage in the biggest game, was his best game of his life.
What a year for Juancho Hernan-Gomez. For him to have been bounced around to like 4 different NBA teams. He stars in a movie. He wins gold. What a year for Juancho.
It's hilarious, man. It honestly is hilarious. And watching that game, what did he go 7 of 9 from the 3-point line? Like, this isn't, he was a gun and this or that. He just didn't miss. He didn't miss. He kept hitting shots. And some of them were, did you see some of the highlights? Like, some of them were hand in the face, fall away 3-pointer and one, and he's draining them. It was truly hilarious.
So I want to ask you this, and I'm trying to ask it in good faith. Okay. So he was traded, obviously, in that deal to the Wolves. Do you think that was a mistake? Should the Nuggets have held on to Juancho long term?
I love that you're asking this one earnestly. I mean, I think the answer is pretty clearly no. He's not a great defender. He's not good enough offensively to be a bad defensive player.
Yeah.
The thing I'll say that's interesting about him, and I think the same about Chanchar, although Chanchar is a good defender, those two guys know how to play basketball. They know how to read the court. They're smart. They're high IQ players. They're less skilled individually than, and it's funny because the NBA, the scale between great individual talent and great team understanding, feel for the game or whatever, those two things, like you need both to be a great NBA player. Steph Curry, for example, has both of those things. Not every player in the NBA has those. One of the funny things is, you remember when Kevin Durant came out and said all that team and passing stuff is cute, but you need the ISO. To me, he got it half right. You need both. You need both things. And like, if team takes away one, it's great to have the other. The team takes away the other, it's great to have the one. To me, Juancho and Vlatko are players that are underrated in how good they are at the team aspect of this. Neither one of them necessarily great individually, although Juancho was great individually in that game. And so for me, it's just the NBA game seems to have the scale slid in the other direction, where the individual talent is more heavily emphasized. And because of that, I don't know that he's like a great NBA player.
I will keep returning to this, unfortunately. And look, DeAndre Jordan has a chance to shut me up. I am probably higher on DeAndre than I think a lot of the discourse online is, just because it's so extreme, and I tend to push back against that. I'm trying to be respectful of what the data shows and what the eye test has shown, which is just that DeAndre Jordan has been one of the worst players to actually get rotation minutes in the NBA over the last 3 seasons. So the question just kind of becomes like, would Juancho be better than DeAndre Jordan? Would you rather have Juancho than DeAndre Jordan? Like, Juancho was on the free agency market and signed with the Raptors. Like, he's bounced around. He's been available.
By the way, Raptors are a great fit for him. I mean, there's a chance he actually plays and has a meaningful role. There's also the positionality of this, though, Matt, because DeAndre Jordan, Nuggets needed a backup center. They identified him. Would they have been better with Juancho and no backup center? I think that's a tough sell for me personally. But nonetheless, look, when Juancho was here, I remember talking with a bunch of people, even within the Nuggets, that were like, yeah, in practice, you should see him. He looks pretty bad. He's not this or that. And I kept thinking, like, I'm not surprised by that. You're talking like, I'm so not surprised he doesn't look good in pickup. He just knows where to be. And it's also not surprising to me that he's featured in some of the Nuggets' biggest upsets, like when everybody was injured and he goes in there and plays well. Again, I don't think he's like a playoff player and all these different things, but for whatever reason, that team aspect, do guys just know how to stay out of the way? Do they know how to cut? Do they know the timing on when to screen and this stuff? He was one of the guys that did. And I think it's part of why Spain, by the way, a team full of those guys. That's what made him so fun to watch and so dynamic.
Are you mad that Nikola Jokic was excluded from the all EuroBasket team?
No, I mean, he lost in the first round. What can you do? And even when you go to the pool play, Serbia was so dominant, and he was so dominant, but the games were never really tested. So had they won one more game, even just lost in the quarterfinals, he probably would have got it. But to me, I mean, Gobert played 3 more games than him, including a final. It makes sense.
Do you think that the Nuggets could have beaten Spain and or France had they advanced?
I mean, there's no question. The Nuggets, the Denver Nuggets, or Serbia?
Sorry, Serbia.
I was like, the Denver Nuggets would have.
The line has been blurred for me. So.
Yeah, that's funny. There's one player that's the same. Yeah, I mean, of course I do. I think Serbia. Look, I don't want to open up the old wounds here, but Chanchar played 10 more minutes than Jokic did in their defeat. Vlatko Chanchar, a role player. Juancho played as many minutes as Jokic did, coming off of the bench, in their final game. So there's no question to me. Just play your guys. It's funny, looking at it all through a new lens, as you kind of watch the tournament go on. To me, in some way, Serbia was a little too old school. Like they need to evolve a little bit. This idea of like, no, we're a team, we're 10 guys. Just play your guys, man. It's do or die time. Jokic's not tired. Just play him. And yes, I think they would have. I honestly think they would have had a harder time with France than they would have with Spain, just matchup wise.
That makes sense. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back and we're going to talk about the wings for the Denver Nuggets heading into training camp, that rotation, what that looks like, minute allocation, all that type of stuff. We'll talk about that when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. But first, I need to tell you about Rocket Money. We love sharing our message with podcasters, and they love sharing their message with us, and it's been so great. Their relationship with us has been so awesome over at Rocket Money. The other day I tried to cancel my Amazon Prime subscription, and it took me, I kid you not, like 4 different tries. How does it take 3 hours to deliver some random cord that I need? But to cancel my subscription, I also have to cancel plans for the next several hours. It's not just me. 80% of people have subscriptions that they forgot about. And that's why I love using Rocket Money, formerly known as Truebill. If you're wasting money on subscriptions, Rocket Money is what's going to help you the most. Do you know how much your subscriptions really cost? Most Americans think they spend around $80 a month on subscriptions when the actual total cost is closer to $200. That's right. You could be wasting hundreds of dollars each month on subscriptions you don't even know about. Rocket Money is there to help you. They're formerly known as Truebill, and they are the absolute best to help you cancel all those unwanted subscriptions. Cancel unnecessary subscriptions with Rocket Money today. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Seriously, it could save you hundreds per year. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Segment 2 here on a Monday. Matt Moore and Adam Mares hanging with you on Locked On Nuggets. So, Adam, we're going to talk about the wings today. On Wednesday, we'll talk about the guards. And on Friday, we're going to talk about the bigs. This was a position I think that the Nuggets have kind of struggled with over the last couple of seasons. But last year, it was particularly dire because they were missing Michael Porter Jr. But the wing rotation, small forwards, two guards, it's been kind of a tough position. It was an area of real need, but this year I think that the Denver Nuggets are probably best loaded than they have been in a long time.
Yeah, yes and no, because while they are more loaded, I mean, the load is Christian Braun and Davon Reed, not exactly proven players at those spots. So you're right that they have bodies as opposed to nobody.
That's interesting. That's it. It could be okay. So do you think of KCP more as a guard than a wing then?
I mean, part of this is defining what that means. So if we're talking about even the twos, like so non-point guards, you're talking about twos, threes, and maybe some fours that are primarily perimeter.
Yeah, like I was expecting to talk about MPJ in this. Like I think MPJ is
MPJ is the guy, but here's my point. MPJ is the wing. If you started the wings like pecking order, MPJ is number one, but we know that he's probably going to miss 20 games this year. I mean, I don't expect him to play back-to-backs. That's 12, 13. Mm-hmm. And there's probably just another 7 games in there he misses if we're being optimistic, whether that's rest, whether that's some ankle roll or just tightness, whatever it is. So if he misses 20 games, that's 20 games where you move another player into the starting lineup, probably a Davon Reed or a Bruce Braun or one of these other wings that you have. And then you're talking about, okay, you have KCP, Bruce Braun, and even those two guys, by the way, carry question marks. They just haven't played with this team before. Do they fit? Are they going to fit the different rotation they're in? Do they like their minutes? There's question marks there. But that just tells me that you're going to have Davon Reed and Christian Braun playing a lot of games and a lot of minutes this year.
Interesting. I think it's funny that I consider Bruce Braun to be labeled best as a guard big. Like, I think that I think the one position that I don't think of him in is wing, even though he has a lot of wing things, just the way that he's kind of his game.
I think he's going to be guarding the perimeter, though. I mean, you're right that he might be guarding guards or what have you, but I think he's going to be guarding the perimeter. Like he'll be guarding Kawhi Leonard.
And it's also interesting to me that both Aaron Gordon and Jeff Green are removed from kind of like you consider those guys to be both more bigs then.
I think this is honestly just semantics. Like they are wing defenders. They are body.
Yeah.
If you said guys that can guard Kawhi Leonard, who's like sort of a quintessential wing, then okay, we're talking Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter, Bruce Braun, KCP, Davon Reed, Christian Braun. That's your stable. And then I guess you would even throw Zeke Naji a little bit into that, although it doesn't make sense necessarily to count him as that.
Yeah, I mean, here's what's interesting is, one, it's funny you mentioned Kawhi just because I keep looking at those tree trunks that his legs have become. He looks more like a big now than anything if you've seen the Muscle Watch season stuff. Like I consider pretty much the wing rotation to be everybody who's not Bones, Jamal, Bruce Braun.
It's funny that he's not a wing to you.
He's not. He's like, because just the way I think of him.
I mean, he's guarding those guys, though. He's guarding wings.
Yeah, that's true. Joker, DeAndre Jordan. I think Braun really does cross between all three positions. But this is kind of part of the whole thing, though, right? As we struggle to nail this down, one of the things I think the Nuggets have done very well is they have more positional flexibility for depth. If they need KCP to play the 3, KCP can do it. If they need Bruce Braun to play the 4, honestly, like he can do it. They have a lot more positional flexibility. I think that does help. One question I have with the Wings is, do you think that there will be better? Will on a 5-point scale grade these for me? The Nuggets wing position overall on cutting, where do you think it lands on a 5-point scale, with 5 being the best?
Michael Porter's very good. Bruce Brown's very good. Aaron Gordon's very good. The other guy's just unproven. Like, I don't know what KCP is as a cutter. I know he's like okay cutter, but I don't know that he's going to be like, I think he's more of a spacer than a cutter. Christian Braun, I think, is going to be good, you know, in the minutes that he plays, but I don't know that he's going to be right out of the package. You'll say he's like a net positive cutter. And then same goes for Davon Reed. I don't know that I was necessarily like, oh, wow, that guy's an elite cutter in his minutes, but we haven't seen enough for me to really have a strong take on it. So half of those guys I think are very good. Michael Porter's a very good cutter. Aaron Gordon's very good. Bruce Brown's very good.
Do you think they have enough shooting at the wing position?
So Michael Porter, this was, as you were talking, I was thinking about it this way. Michael Porter represents the best shooting they've ever had at the wing. They've had him before, but he represents the best shooting they've ever had from the small forward position. And then if you consider the shooting guard spot there as well, KCP is on par with a Will Barton to me as a shooter, and a Gary Harris and those guys. So yes, I think that the shooting is really good. And then when you go to the second unit, you know, Christian Braun, Davon Reed, Bruce Brown, very hot or cold to me. Like, those guys are going to have some nights where you're like, wow, that won you the game because they just made a lot of their threes. And there's going to be games where you're like, how did they not make any?
We're getting to the back of the rotation here, because when we talk about, we've got like the starting 5, and then there's, you know, Bruce Brown and Bones, and probably one of the bigs, either Jeff Green or DeAndre Jordan, and then Zeke, right? So that's already 9. So we're getting to really the back end of the rotation here. I do want to ask this question, though, of you. I get the impression that you are slightly higher on Christian Braun than Davon Reed. Is that accurate at this point? And I have a follow-up after that.
For the purposes of what the Nuggets need, because Davon Reed to me last year was primarily an offensive player. He had some very good defensive moments against LeBron James and some of this or that, but I was less impressed with his defense than I was his offense. And I think Denver probably needs somebody that's going to be a lockdown defender. I don't know if Christian Braun's that. I thought his defense was sneaky great in Summer League. I think it went a little bit under the radar because what was much louder about his game was the fact that he couldn't make a shot standing wide open. But his defense is very good, and I think that's what Denver needs.
That's interesting, because I lean a lot towards Davon in this capacity. I think that's not surprising given my history of having skepticism towards rookies. Like, you just got to prove it to me. But also I think it's based off of, you're right that Davon's off-ball defense sometimes got torched. He is, as a specific tool defensively, I think he's adequate to good, right? So it's like, we got to steal 5 minutes here where they're running PG with the second unit. Right.
I think you're right about adequate to good. I don't think he's a bad defender. I was unimpressed because, to me, when you bring in a guy like that, you think, okay, is this what he is? He bringing in a guy with a 7-foot wingspan. He's meant to be especially when your team desperately needed that, and he wasn't that. Christian Braun at the college level he was an extremely good defender. In fact, in the national title game, he won them the game down 15 in the second half by going and shutting down all the perimeter attacks. So to me, is he that at the NBA level? We don't know. He did that at the college level, at an elite level. He did that in Summer League in a way that I was very impressed with. So I don't know. We'll see if he can do that at the NBA level.
Something really interesting to kind of keep track of as through training camp, I think, is going to be that, like, hey, how did Davon look today? Hey, how's Christian Braun doing? And that's one where Malone's comments will be pretty telling. Malone won't feel the need to disguise, I don't think, those comments as much. Unless he's listening to the show. Hey, coach. And
I think you're right about it. Those guys, you get to speak freely about them.
Yeah. And so I think he can be like, yeah, you know, Christian's learning. If you hear that, it's like, well, you know, Christian's learning. It's going to be a process. We love his upside. Love what he brought. What I loved today was they rebounded. He really rebounded very well.
Those are almost insults. Those are almost encouragements of like, the energy was there. Like,
the energy was really there. He's just going to learn.
Jay here in the chat says, Malone will trust Reed more this season. If I had a Malone, again, we just don't know. I mean, to say you really know anything about Davon Reed and Christian Braun, like, they played such little minutes and under such unique circumstances. This will be a completely different year, obviously, for both of them. But if I were doing a Malone, who I think Malone's going to trust the most Davon Reed, by the way, made some high-profile mistakes last year, including running onto the court during live play. If you don't remember, like, I don't know that you could just pencil Reed in for Malone's circle of trust. You know, the guy who I think will be, though, hilariously, is going to be Jack White. And I don't think it's going to take a lot for Jack White to go. I'm just saying, Jack White, we talk about the, like, do you know what you're doing versus are you talented? Yeah. He is way over here he's been a professional for several years. He comes from Duke. Like, he knows how to do, he's a polished product, even if he's not necessarily super talented. So to me, he's probably going to be a guy that Malone's like, you know who I like? Jack White.
All right, let me write this down. Jack White over.
No, I'm not saying he's going to play over. We're talking about the coded language. And I'm telling you, Jack White's going to be the guy that, like, oh, first day of training camp, 0 mistakes. Wow, look at that.
That will be interesting to watch. I think this group is the strongest that it's been because for me, wing really is. It's KCP. It's like, let's go ahead and put Bruce Brown in because he can play every position. KCP, Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, Zeke Naji, if he's needed, can play there. Christian Brown, Davon Reed. Like, there's just Michael Porter Jr. And I would put Aaron Gordon in that capacity as well because Aaron Gordon does defend. Honestly, I don't know where to put Aaron at this point. I really don't. I don't know where to put. I have positionality is obviously fluid in the NBA. I really have no idea where to put Aaron because Aaron operates so much on the wing and he cuts and he defends guards. The way the Nuggets use Aaron is really much more like a wing to me than a big. He doesn't post up that much, which he shouldn't, and he doesn't even rebounding. I don't think necessarily is the emphasis that they've put on. I don't feel like they've put a lot of emphasis on Aaron to rebound. You know?
Yeah. This year he needs to, though, and I think there'll be an opportunity. Aaron Gordon's the most interesting one to me because his role changes so much. I mean, to me, he doesn't need to ever think about scoring. He just runs, rebounds, defends. We'll see if he takes that, if that's his mentality. But to me, this is what's exciting about him and why I think he's going to have a great year.
Let's take a break. We're going to come back and we'll talk about the Southwest Division as we continue previewing the other Western Conference divisions here on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for joining us and making this part of your day. Really appreciate you guys joining us and being a part of the show. Now, go make the NBA Top 50 on Locked On NBA your second listen. Which NBA player moves the betting line the most this season? Locked On and BetOnline odds makers present the NBA Top 50 most valuable players. Find it on Locked On NBA, wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. I did defend Jokic's honor on this and said that he should be above others based off of his impact on the court. I will say that betting-wise, honestly, the Sharps love Denver so much, it's very, very hard for the Nuggets to beat the line. Like, that's part of the thing is he grades out so well in every single metric. Like, the Nuggets have just been a sharp bettor's dream the last couple of seasons. So their lines always wind up closing much higher because of the faith that they have in not only Jokic, but Michael Malone. All right, we're going to talk about the Southwest Division. And if you don't know, because I often find that people are like, I don't really know who's in what division. That's the Texas teams. So Houston, San Antonio, and Dallas, Memphis, and New Orleans. This is an interesting division, I think, Adam, from the perspective of if there is, it is widely assumed that these teams are going to be below Denver in terms of the standings, that whoever even wins this division should be lower. Memphis is comparable in terms of their win total.
I don't know. Everybody's taking Memphis, man, above Denver, so we'll see.
Who's everybody?
I mean, it just seems like everybody's a lot higher on Memphis as a team than they are on Denver. What is the preseason over unders for both teams? Are they the same?
Denver is 51.5. Memphis is 51.5. The sharper books have Memphis at 48.5.
Okay, interesting.
They've taken money on the Memphis under, and part of that money was from me. I bet the Memphis under pretty aggressively. There's a lot of reasons, I think, for Memphis to be worse this season. It's not just the Jaren Jackson thing. They lost 2 key rotation players in Kyle Anderson and DeAnthony Melton. That depth hurts. Like, you're having, Nuggets fans know this, when your depth gets compromised. When you have fewer guys that you can count on, when it's like, Ja had knee soreness and Tyus tweaked an ankle in the first quarter, and now you don't have DeAnthony Melton. Kyle Anderson was kind of a steadying force for them. Jaren Jackson could be back anytime between the start of the season in January. And I tend to always lean a little bit more skeptical in recent years as far as NBA returns from these injuries. Everyone tends to be more cautious with them. So I think that there's a pretty good chance Ja is working on a jumper to try and counter how teams have guarded him. the book, I think, is out on him that you can switch against him and be a lot more effective. Teams don't want to switch in the regular season because it's a lot of work. I talk about this all the time. Playing drop's easier. You play drop versus Ja and he kills you. You play switch versus Ja and he has a harder time. So I'm expecting them to throw that at him a little bit more this season. I think Memphis probably slides a little bit into the mid to high 40s. I still think they're obviously a playoff team. I think there's a chance they can wind up in the play-in. But I do think that they take a pretty significant step backwards this season. And I do expect Denver to have more success against them than they did this season when Memphis won the regular season series.
Is there any chance that, so you have Dallas, New Orleans, and Memphis, we'll handicap the three of them winning, and then handicap the other two? Houston, San Antonio, I think are pretty much out. But what are the odds for each of those teams winning the division?
The odds as far as the bookmakers go, Memphis is...
No, I want the Matt Moore odds, though.
Oh, you want mine? Yeah, no problem. I put Dallas and New Orleans at the same, which is plus 175.
Okay.
And then I would put Memphis closer to plus 250.
Wait. So you think Memphis is third?
Yes.
Wow.
I think not only do I think Memphis is third in the odds, I think Memphis finishes third. I think both Dallas and New Orleans finish. I bet this.
Wow.
I've bet one New Orleans to Dallas to finish in the division. That's how much I think Memphis falls off.
I'm kind of buying New Orleans this year. I'm not, but everybody knows I'm not buying Memphis. Although Memphis might be a good regular season team. We'll see. But I think I'm buying New Orleans. Dallas, to me, their floor just feels higher because Luka's just so good and it's so simple to do what they do. I don't mind that take. I don't mind it. It feels like it's spicy. The books have it opposite, right?
Yeah, the books think that Memphis is the favorite and New Orleans is 4-1. Like, that's absurd. You have Zion. You take a team that was,
man.
Well, not only that,
Willie Green's a good coach.
You take a team that was after the 1-12 start. So the rest of the way,
you're right. Yep.
They were a 500 team.
Yeah.
After CJ got there, they were a 500 team, but that was only in like 13 games because Jonas, Ingram, and CJ all missed time. Like, if you actually get into, if you just take the baseline of they're a 500 team, internal improvement from Herb Jones, who I think is going to be a top 5. I think he already is, honestly. I think he's a top 5 perimeter defender in the NBA. Trey Murphy. You have whatever Dyson Daniels brings if he gets minutes.
Honestly, the talent, you're just going through talent, though, to me. That's like a lot of talent, and I'm with you on all of it. It's like they're so talented. Mm-hmm. The question is, that team really came together under Willie Green and without Zion, who I think is a giant disruptor. Yes. Both because he's such a unique player and because, let's be honest, I don't think he's been the best. He's gotten off to the greatest start there. There's been some frictions, including between him and Brandon Ingram. So how do those come together? That's the big question.
This is a key question. Is I don't think Zion is ready in his career to come in and be like, I'm the guy, because you can't just come in and be like, I'm the guy with arrogance. You have to earn that.
But I don't think he did, though. Here's the important thing. I don't think he did understand Van Gundy and Alvin Gentry.
Agree.
And I don't think he did prior to CJ McCollum. When CJ got there last year and kind of called him out, not really, but just kind of called him out. Like, to me, it was very meaningful and then the team started winning and the vibes are great and he's not a part of that. And so I'm with you that I do feel like the table is set for Zion to sort of start the process of like, hey, as great as you are, you've got to get these other guys to sort of rally behind you or alongside you. And that's the big question for me with them this year. And I'm just saying, I think that'll be the story there, not the talent. All the talent, it's there enough for them to be very good. Will that work? Well, by the way, I'm making this sound like a Zion thing. It's a Brandon Ingram thing too, in my opinion. But just from everything I hear, it's both of those guys have to kind of understand they need each other and figure out how to be together.
So Ingram wins most improved player, and he basically vaults into star status. And last year, he's the best player on a playoff team. What is his relationship going to be like because the problem is not only Zion's talent, but the way that he plays. And it's just like, he can't not be the best player on the team. There's no structure where Zion is just like a guy or B or the second dude or a connector. Like, Zion is the core component. It is the star that the solar system has to operate around. And I genuinely do not know if Brandon Ingram is okay with that, given how he views his NBA career.
Yeah.
And the answer of like, you know what, winning cures all. It's true. It's more that in these situations, winning oftentimes kind of papers over those problems, but it shows up in clutch time. This was a big issue 2 years ago, was Ingram and Zion did not have great chemistry late in games,
Right.
in large part because Ingram is used to in those moments being like, I'm going to create the shot. I'm going to get to a step back. I'm going to hit the big shot for us to win, when everyone else in the arena is like, hey, why don't you give the ball to seriously one of the most efficient players offensively in the NBA, one of the most impactful, monstrous dudes in the league. No one can stop Zion. He's going to get the ball. That tension, I think, is going to continue. A lot of this depends on what your opinion of Willie Green is, which we only
super
have
high.
year.
It's super high. And
Yeah.
same goes for CJ McCollum, who I think is like a good player in this regard to kind of handle that. And he's in the right role. He's not the best player, but he's good enough also that his voice carries weight. You know, he's one of the best players. So I think I kind of have faith in those guys. I just think when we talk about win totals, that might be the process. I don't think it'll be game one. Oh, the synergy is amazing. But I do think at some point they figure it out and become a very good team. I'm with you, man. I'm going Pels, Grizzlies, Dallas. I think that's the order.
So I like Dallas a lot.
Yeah.
I think, again, my stuff is always impacted by the idea of what the value is, right? Like I'm higher on teams relative to their value. I'll just say this. I think the Jalen Brunson loss is overrated because I'm expecting what is going to be an absolutely absurd statistical season from Luka Doncic. It's not based off of how good he is or how efficient he is. He's just going to have the ball all the freaking time. Like he's going to have an insane usage rate, I think, this season. Spencer Dinwiddie is not going to take enough of those away. He's not going to make up for Jalen Brunson's loss. I think such a big chunk of Jalen's usage just goes to Luka. Tim Hardaway Jr. is back. You've got Tim Hardaway Jr., who I think is an above average defender, Reggie Bullock, who I think is an above average defender, and Dorian Finney-Smith, who I think is a I would go ahead and classify him as an elite defender. So no matter how bad the bigs are, their scheme is to play everything to the perimeter anyway. Do they have better rim protection in terms of a shot blocker, clock situations? Yeah, JaVale McGee will be able to provide that. Their numbers were good with Maxi Kleber in that situation. Christian Wood's a defensive dumpster fire, but offensively, he's a great fit with Luka. That's an awesome fit offensively. I don't want to necessarily think that Jason Kidd is a good coach, but I have no reason to really think that they're going to be worse, or that I can't find anything in last year's defense that in any of film analysis, statistical work, anything to be like, that's where it was smoke and mirrors. Dallas was just inexplicably really good defensively, honestly better than Memphis. So I do think that Dallas has finished second or first in the division.
I agree with you on everything other than the impact of it. I think Luka has a career year, but part of it is having that secondary release valve that is specifically has Jalen Brunson's skill set, to me, is really key. It reminds me of LeBron James with Mo Williams. It reminds me of LeBron James with Dwayne Wade in some cases. It reminds me of LeBron James, especially with Kyrie Irving. Spencer Dinwiddie, similar but different skill set in a way that I think is going to make, as much as I think Luka will have a great year, I think it'll make the overall impact of the Dallas offense just a little bit less. So I'm with you. He's going to be great. I just don't think Dallas will be as good.
Rank who you, right now, as we sit here on September 19th, 8 months away from the playoffs or whatever, rank who you would most want the Nuggets to see in the playoff series and who you would least of those three.
Dallas, number one. Man, it's weird to say New Orleans. They're kind of man. I think I would probably say Dallas one, just because I'm going to buy that Aaron Gordon's going to be a good matchup for Luka. I'm going to buy that Jokic is going to be able to bully and be the best player. You know, he's going to be unguardable in that series. And I just think Denver has more weapons, even though going up against Luka is really crazy. I'd go Memphis too. Ja would be tough, and then they have some front court size and a very smart coach. The Pelicans are just such an oddball to me. Like, it might, at the end of the year, this might be in a reverse order, but to me, the Pelicans represent, by the end of the year, a team that's really scary. How do you guard Zion? How do you guard, Brandon Ingram then? Like who's going there? They have bigs like Valanciunas and Billy Hernan-Gomez. Like, they have bodies they can throw at Jokic just to foul him and get physical with him. So to me, they're a little bit more concerning, but I don't know. We'll have to wait. I might have a different order by the end of the year.
Best to worst matchups, I would say, are 1, New Orleans, because I don't think they can get stops versus Denver. 2 is Memphis, and 3 I think is Dallas. The reason I say that,
So
a big
we
reason,
opposite orders.
yeah, the big reason I like the Dallas matchup for Denver a couple of seasons ago was that Luka wasn't used to seeing 2 on ball. He wasn't used to seeing that blitz pressure. He figured it out last year, and so I would be worried about their ability to slice and dice Denver playing at the level, which means that then you're like, okay, maybe we should play drop, and now you've got Jokic and drop versus Luka, or Luka or Jokic and an island on Luka, and those are difficult situations for Denver to manage. So that's where I come down on it.
Who's guarding Jokic there though? Christian Wood?
No, JaVale would guard him.
I mean, I feel really great.
Hey, I am not going to get sucked into who's pretty good. Like, there is no good matchup for Jokic. He's going to dominate anybody. He figured out Draymond Green. He can figure out anybody. There's nobody that's stopping Nikola. It's about whether or not you can control the glass versus Denver, and whether or not you can get stops on everybody else. That's like the key.
Oh.
The other 2 teams in this division, the San Antonio Spurs and the Houston Rockets. I have a take that no one will care about, but is except like the hardest of hardcore NBA nerds. I think Houston will be better on defense than they are on offense this season. That is my
because
I do not care.
Of Usman Garuba.
Honestly,
that guy can defend. Can I tell you that guy?
Yeah,
like he's a rare example of a player that's so good defensively, it's entertaining to watch.
Herb Jones is in that category. So
he is. We're one of those guys where you're kind of like, holy crap, nobody can shake this dude. And he's big. He doesn't look like I would not have guessed he's a guy that could step out on Dennis Schroeder and like shadow him because he's huge.
This is a crazy thing I found. Alperen Şengün is a better perimeter defender and weak side rim protector than he is in the post or versus any big or versus like standard wings. Like
he's good, man.
He is. Well,
he's really good.
Okay.
I think he's a good player.
He plays the way you like. He plays the way that you are partial to. I will say one of the things is that he's very Domantas and Jokic like in the way he wants to play, but versus those guys who are like at his age were a half second ahead of the defense.
They're also bigger. Like he's smaller in a meaningful way.
He's also 2.5 seconds behind the defense. And honestly, here's what's really funny, Adam.
When I say he's good, maybe we have different expectations. To me, he's a Boris Diaw type, which you're right. That is the type of player I like, but I like him more as this like Aaron Gordon level player. He's not a star. He's like a great connector role player type. So maybe we have different like goals for what they should become.
The plan from Rockets fans and some of the media that talk to people is like he's going to be the offensive hub. And that's where I'm like, ooh, that's a lot for him.
I know I've said this a million times. People are going to roll their eyes at it, but Boris Diaw was as much the hub of the offense for the Spurs in 2014 as any player. So it's like, so I kind of understand it. I just wouldn't if the expectation is that he's an all-star type, like superstar type player where everybody is built in his image. Like, no, that he's not that good, but I think he's a guy that fits into a well-established team extremely well.
Anyway, Houston's gonna be bad. San Antonio is gonna be purposely bad. There's a lot of guys on San Antonio I like though. When I did the film stuff, Trey Jones is amazing. He's amazing. He's really good. I'm in on Trey Jones. I'm in on Keldon Johnson. Jakob Poeltl, I expect to be traded. There was a report this morning that they're looking for 2 firsts for him, which they're not going to get. But everyone in the league still expects him to be traded by January. I like the rookies that they've added. San Antonio will be fun, but they're going to intentionally lose a lot of games. They won 20 in 97 to get Duncan. Do you think this Spurs team will win more or less than that team did?
More.
Okay. There you go.
20.
All right.
So few.
Yeah. All right. That's going to wrap it up for Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. On Wednesday, we'll talk about the guards for the Denver Nuggets and expectations and rotations and minutes for them this season. We'll also check in on another NBA division as we go through, as we get ready for training camp next week. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have yourselves a great week. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On Nuggets.